CRT 5:1. Now the children of God were molded by the hand of God, which is called Awen, and it manifested according to their desires. For all things that have life are molded by Awen. The fox, shivering in the cold lands, longs for warmth, and so its cubs have coats. The owl, clumsy in the dark, longs to see its prey more clearly, and in generations of longing the desire is granted. Awen makes everything what it is, for all things change under its law. CRT 5:2. Men too are molded by their desires, but unlike the beasts and birds, their yearnings are circumscribed by the laws of fate and destiny, and the law of sowing and reaping. These, the desires modified by the laws, are called enid vadu. Unlike the beasts and birds, this, in man, is something relating to him rather than to his offspring, though they are not untouched by it. CRT 5:3. Destiny may be likened to a man who must travel to a distant city. Whether or not he wishes to make the journey, the destination being his destiny, he may choose whether to go by way of a river or by way of a plain, whether across mountains or through forests, on foot or horseback, slow or fast, and whatever befalls because of this decision is fate. If a tree falls on him because he chose the forest path, it was fated, for luck is an element of fate. Destiny leaves no choice. Fate gives limited choice, which may be good or bad, but it cannot be averted. What is fated must be, for at no point can there be any turning back. CRT 5:4. The circumstances, enid vadu, of the traveler conformed to the law of sowing and reaping. He may travel in comfort or pain, happily or sorrowfully, with strength or weakness, heavily burdened or lightly burdened, well prepared or ill prepared. When the destination is set according to the degrees of a former life, then the circumstances of the journey should conform with the desire. For what use is it desiring a great destination when the law of sowing and reaping decrees that an intolerable burden must be carried on the way? Far better to have lesser aspiration. The decrees of fate are many, the decrees of destiny are few. CRT 5:5. When the earth was young and the race of man still as children, there were fertile green pastures in the lands, where all is now sand and barren wasteland. In the midst of it was a garden land, which lay against the edge of the earth, eastward towards the sun rising, and it was called Meru, meaning the place of the garden on the plain. It lay at the foot of a mountain, which was cleft at its rising, and out of it flowed the river of Tadana, which watered the plain from the mountain. On the other side ran the river Kal, which watered the plain through the land of Kaladin. The river Nara flowed westward, and then turned back to flow around the garden land. CRT 5:6. It was a fertile place, for out of the ground grew every kind of tree that was good for food, and every tree that was pleasant to the sight. Every herb that could be eaten and every herb that flowered was there. The tree of life, which was called Glacier, having leaves of gold and copper, was within the sacred enclosure. There too was the great tree of wisdom, bearing the fruits of knowledge, granting the choice and ability to know the true from the false. It is the same tree which can be read as man read a book. There also was the tree of trespass, beneath which grew the lotus of rapture, and in the center was the place of power, where God made his presence known. CRT 5:7. Time passed, and the children of God were grown strong and upright under the tempering hammer of God in earth. The anvil of God became more kindly. All was pleasant and food plentiful. But life pales in such places, for it is against the nature of man to flourish in these circumstances. Earth is not for pleasurable dallying. It is a place of teaching, trial, and testing. CRT 5:8. The children of God were not yet the heirs of God, nor inheritors of godhood. But there was one among them who had almost completed the pilgrimage of Enid Vadu. He had unraveled the tangled schemes of fate and traversed the tumultuous seas of life to the many ports of destiny, and having paid the debts of sowing and reaping, was one triumphant over Enid Vadu. CRT 5:9. He was Fanvar, son of Amma and Atim. He was wise and knew all things. He beheld mysteries and the secret things hidden from the eyes of other men. He saw sunrise and the sun setting in their splendor, but longed for things not realizable in the place where he lived. So because he walked with God, he was culled out from his kind and brought to Merua, the garden place. CRT 5:10. He came to it across the mountains and wastelands, arriving after many days' journeying. Weary and close to death because of the privations he suffered, he could just reach the refreshing waters, from which he drank deeply, and filled with exhaustion he slept. In his sleep he dreamed, and this was the manner of his dreaming. He saw before him a being of indescribable glory and majesty, who said, "I am the God above all, even above the God of your people. I am that which fulfills the aspirations of men, and I am that in which they are fulfilled. You, having traversed all the circles of Enid Vadu and established your worthiness, are now made my governor on earth, and you shall rule all things here, guiding them in my ways, leading them ever upwards into glory. This will be your labor, and behold, here is your reward." CRT 5:11. A cloud mist seemed to gather about the glorious being, enfolding him so he was no longer visible. Then the mist gradually cleared, and the man saw another form emerging. It was that of a woman, but one such as Fanvar had never seen before, beautiful beyond his conception of beauty, with such perfection of form and grace that he was dumbfounded. Yet the vision was not substantial. She was a wraith, an ethereal being. CRT 5:12. The man awoke and sought food from the fruits about him, and having refreshed himself, wandered about the garden. Wherever he went, he saw the wraith, but was unafraid because she smiled encouragingly, bringing comfort to his heart. He built himself a shelter and grew strong again, but always wherever he went, the wraith was not far distant. CRT 5:13. One day, near the edge of the garden, he fell asleep in the heat of the day, and awoke to find himself surrounded by the sons of Bothus. Not true men, but yoslings, kinsfolk to the beasts of the forest. Before they could take his strength and wisdom, he loosed himself among them, slaying some in his rage and might, before the rest ran away. When it was done, he set himself down beneath a great tree, for he was wounded and blood gushed out from his side, and gathered thickly beside him. He became faint, falling into a deep sleep, and while he slept, a wondrous thing happened. The wraith came and lay beside him, taking blood from his wound upon herself, so it congealed about her, Thus the spirit being became clothed with flesh, born of congealing blood, and being sundered from his side, she arose a mortal woman. CRT 5:14. In his heart, Fanvar was not addressed because of her likeness, but she was gentle, ministering to him with solicitude, and being skillful in the ways of healing, she made him whole. Therefore, when he had grown strong again, he made her queen of the garden land, and she was so called even by our fathers, who named her Gula, but Fanvar called her Arua, meaning helpmate in our tongue. She is called the Lady of Langvid. CRT 5:15. Now God enlightened Fanvar concerning the woman, saying, this woman was drawn from her compatible abode in a realm of beauty through the yearning aspirations of men. Her coming accomplishes something which would otherwise have taken countless generations. For earth is more fitting for men to learn manly things than for women to learn womanly ones. This woman is not as other women, being in no way like yourself. Every hair of her head is unlike that of a man. Every drop of blood and every particle of flesh is that of a woman, and quite unlike that of a man. Her thoughts and desires are different. She is neither coarse nor uncouth, being altogether of another, more refined realm. Her daughters will walk proudly endowed with every womanly perfection and grace. Delicacy, modesty, and charm will be the lovely jewels enhancing their womanliness. Henceforth, man will be truly man, and woman will be truly woman. Men being girded with manliness, and women clothed with womanliness. Yet they shall walk together, hand in hand, toward the ascending glory before them, each the helpmate and inspiration of the other. So Fanvar and Arua lived in contentment amid bounty and fruitfulness, with freedom from afflictions and sickness. They delighted in each other, and because of their differences, were drawn closer together. CRT 5:16. Arua brought but one thing with her when she crossed the misty frontier, the treasure of Langvid, the jewel contained in the moon chalice, the stone of inspiration fashioned by the desires of men, never owned by any but the daughters of Arua. This the Lingil Arua gave to Fanvar as her dowry and her pledge of purity and exclusiveness. She followed the ways of the cradle land, not the ways of earth. CRT 5:17. Within the garden land was the sacred enclosure, the domain of Fanvar and Arua, forbidden to those of the children of God who had now come to this place. It contained the chalice of fulfillment, granting any who drank from it the realization of all things to which they aspired. None might drink from this save Fanvar and Arua. Also, there was the cauldron of immortality, containing an essence distilled from the fruits growing in the garden, and this guarded against mortal ills. CRT 5:18. Arua brought forth a son by Fanvar, and he was called Ratuk, and a daughter who was called Armina. Each knew the mysteries of magic and the ways of the stars. In the fullness of time, Ratuk married among the daughters of the sons of God, and had two sons, Nanar and Nendaka. It was Nanar who first taught the weaving of cloth from plants, and Nendaka was a mighty hunter. Armina also married among the sons of God, and brought forth a son, who was called Balenke, and daughters called Ananua and Mamita. Ananua knew the making of pots and things of clay, and Mamita the taming of beasts and birds. CRT 5:19. Nandaka had two sons, Namtara and Canaan. Namtara had two sons also, Nandaka and Dedam, before dying in the fullness of manhood. Belinki married Enidva and had a son called Enkidu, and a daughter called Astartha, meaning maid in the morning, and she became a great teacher among the children of God. This was the Astartha who became the first moon maiden, being later called Lady of the Morning Star. Enkidu had a daughter, and her name was Mava. CRT 520. Outside the sacred enclosure, known as Jasar, but forming a gateway into it was a circular structure of stones called Gilgal, and within this was a shrine, wherein was kept a sacred vessel called Gwendua. This was like a goblet, and was made of rainbow-hued crystal, set in gold with pearls. Above the cup appeared a shimmering moon-colored mist, like a thin, cold flame. At certain times, when the heavens were in a proper position, the Gwendua was filled with moon dew and potions from the cauldron within the sacred enclosure, making a pale honey-colored liquor, and this the people drank from the goblet. However, there were different proportions in the vessel for those of the blood of Fanvar and Arua, and those who were children of God, but not of their blood. It was the potion from the Gwendua which kept sickness and disease away from those who drank it. CRT 521. Dadam, the first father, married Letha, and they had a son called Herthu. Dadam then married Mava, who had a daughter not by him, and this was Guinevere. The cuckoo child, fathered by Abrimened of Gorthon, son of Nimtinigal, whom we call Luid the Dark Father. CRT 522. About the land of the children of God was the wasteland, where Yoslings called the children of Zumat, which means they who inherit death, dwelt. Amongst these, Nimtinigal, the wily hunter, was the most wise and cunning. He alone was unafraid of the children of God, and he alone dared enter the guarding land. CRT 523. In the days when Astartha was teaching, Namtinigal often came to hear her words, and the children of God were not displeased, for teaching the wild men about them was a duty with which they had been charged. Namtinigal therefore participated in their rites, but could not partake of the elixir from the Gwenduva, because this was forbidden, while it gave health and strength to the children of God, safeguarding them from the sickness of the Yoslings. If given to others, it caused a wasting away. It was also altogether forbidden for any of the children of God to mate with the Yoslings, for this was deemed to be the most unforgivable of sins. CRT 524. Now the wily one learned much from Astartha, and in the fullness of time brought his own son to her, and he became as her son, living in her house and forsaking the ways of his people. Astartha called him Luid, the light-bringer, for it was her intention that he should be taught the ways of those who walked in light, that he might in time enlighten his own people. CRT 525. Leewid grew up tall and handsome. He was quick to learn and became wise. He was also a man of the chase, strong and enduring, a hunter of renown. But there were times when the call of his people was strong. Then he would go out furtively into the night to indulge in their dark rituals. Thus he became knowledgeable in the ways of the flesh and in the carnal indulgences of the body. CRT 526. Dadam became a servant of the sacred enclosure where the misty veil between the realms could be penetrated, for all those having the blood of Arua had twin sight, an ability to see the race and Sith folk, Ansis and spirit beings, all the things of the other world, not clearly, but as through a veil. CRT 527. Beside the place called Jasar was a pleasant parkland, with trees of every kind and a stream, also thickets of flowering bushes, and all manner of plants growing lushly. It was the custom of Maeva to wander there in the sunshine, and Luid also went there. So it came about that they met among the trees. Maeva knew the man, but had shunned him in the past. Now she saw he was handsome, possessed of many attractions. So her foot was stayed, and she did not run away. CRT 528. As the days passed, they dallied longer together, and Leeward talked of things Maeva had not heard before. She felt a stirring in her blood, but did not respond or heed his temptations because of the things that were forbidden. So Leeward went to the Moon Mother, wise woman of the Oslings, and telling of his desires, beseeched her to help him. The Moon Mother gave him 2 apples, containing a vile substance, which they had drawn through their stalks. This Leeward gave to Maeva, who then became helpless in his hands. CRT 529. They met again after this, for Maeva became enamored towards Leeward, but it happened that she became ill with a strange sickness, and was afraid. Then Dadam became ill, and Leeward also, and Leeward said to the woman, "You must obtain the pure essences from within the sacred enclosure, and Satina, the Moon Mother, will prepare an elixir which will cure us." This he said because none of his kind had ever been able to obtain the sacred substances, though they had always coveted what had been denied them. Now, because of her frailty, the woman was pliable in his hands, and Leeward seized the opportunity. CRT 530. To achieve his ends, Leeward gave Maeva a potion which had been prepared by the Moon Mother, and she administered this to Dadam and those with him by guile and deceit, so that they fell asleep. While they slept, Maeva stole from the secret substances and took them to Leeward, who gave them to the Moon Mother, and she made a brew. CRT 531. Part of this was given to Maeva, and the rest was drunk by the Oslings from their awful Inkatal during their night rites. When the morning came, they were all smitten with grievous pains, and before the sun set that day, all the Oslings were stricken with a sickness such as they had not known before. CRT 532. Maeva took what had been given to her, and finding Dadam laid low in his bed, gave him a draught from her vessel. Though she had to use womanly wiles to get him to drink it, she drank the remainder, and they both slept. But when they awoke in the morning, both were suffering pains, and this was something they had not known before. Dadam said to the woman, "What have you done? For what has happened to us cannot be unless the things which are forbidden have been done." The woman replied, "Lord, I was tempted, and I fell. I have done that which is forbidden and unforgivable." CRT 533. Dadam said, "I am bound by duty to do certain things. But first, let us go into the Jasar, to the place called Beth Kilcris, where I will seek enlightenment." So they went there together, and stood before the shrine, beneath the tree of wisdom. There they were filled with an inflowing vision, seeing themselves as they were, and as they should have been, and they were ashamed. He, because he had not followed the proper path of a man, and she, because her falsity. There in the reflecting mist, the contamination of the woman was revealed, and the man's heart shriveled within him, like a flower licked by the flame. CRT 534. Then they saw a great spirit being materializing in the reflecting mist, and he said to them, "Woe to you and your house, for the greatest of evils has befallen the race of the children of God." and it is defiled. The heritage of Kadamhapa is lost. The fetid flow defiling the woman results from the incompatible intermingling. But it is not all. For sicknesses and diseases are also generating from the ferments of the impure implantation. CRT 535. Dadam said, "The fault is with the woman. Wherefore should I suffer?" The spirit being replied, "Because you two are now as one. The cankerworms of disease and sickness strike both equally, but you shall not again defile this place. Henceforth the misty veil becomes an impenetrable barrier, severing our two realms from each other, so they can no longer be easily spanned between us. There will now be no means of communication. Henceforth, man and woman, fated to unite in love divine, shall be divided and set apart. Though ever yearning reunion, they may cleave one to the other, seeking the unity which will rekindle the flame. But unless their efforts transcend the limitations of earthly things, they will be in vain. The spirit of man is now severed from the whole and cast again into unconsciousness, and it too shall long for reunion with the whole. The spark shall seek to return to the fire, for otherwise it becomes nothing. The web of fate is rewoven, and the paths of destiny remade. The design of life is redrawn. Again, the progression begins in ignorance, birth and death, pain and pleasure, joy and sorrow, success and failure, love and hate, peace and war. All the light and shade, the many hues making the splendidly intricate patterns of life on earth. This is a new beginning, but a beginning not in purity and unencumbered, but one already weighted with debts and burdens. CRT 536. The spirit being continued, "Enough wickedness has been brought by your willfulness and disobedience, for the decrees forbidding certain things were for your own benefit. Immortality was nearly within your reach, but had you achieved this, you would have brought an even more grievous evil upon yourselves and your inheritors. For freed from servitude to change, you and they would have been unable to progress." CRT 537. The children of God were driven out of the garden land by spirit beings, and then guardians were set at its gates, so none could re-enter. Then it was withdrawn beyond the misty veil. The waters ceased to flow, and the fertility departed. Only a wilderness remained. The children of God went to dwell in the land of Amenegil, which is beyond the mountains of Meshur, by the sea of Dalmuna. CRT 538. From this time onward, man fashioned his own spirit likeness. Some, who were loathsome in aspect, even unto themselves, went apart and were mercifully veiled in dark depths. And they said among themselves, "Let us dwell here in the darkness, and prepare a place for others like ourselves, so that when they follow, they abide here and join us." Thus were the dark regions formed, and inhabited by demons who are not, but the hideously fashioned spirits of evil man. CRT 539. These things have been written into the record. In Seboit, they used to say this was the manner of man's making. God sent his creating craftsman spirit down to earth, and the reflection of the one was drawn into a spiritless body, and this became the heart of man. CRT 540. These are the words written by Thanias of Myra and Laodicea in his day. CRT 541. You ask me, what is man? And I answer, he is life, becoming aware of itself. He is the intangible, knowing the tangible. Spirit and matter, fire and water. When this first happened, none remembers, and only the old folk tales remain. There was the beginning, and then the garden, and it was in this garden man found himself. Before this, he was not free, being one with everything about him. As he could not disobey, good and evil could not be. They were non-existent. CRT 542. Man became free through awareness of himself, and with this knowledge denied any kinship with the beast. As he was no longer in harmonious relationship with things of the earth, he became discontented, dissatisfied, and restless. He wanted to belong, but felt his place of belonging was not there. He had been reborn as a man-god, and therefore it is truly said that man was born of earth, and spirit under a tree, the symbol of life, and in a garden. CRT 543. There the eyes of the man and woman were opened, and being above the beast, they knew they were different, and set apart from all else that breathed. They separated themselves, being now ashamed of their state and strangers to each other. The carnal satisfaction of lesser creatures now no longer sufficed. They had lost contact with the source of love, but, though knowing something was lacking, knew not what. They had fallen into carnal knowledge, which only man can know, for only he feels the reproach of divinity. They were removed from the garden of content by an inhalation of the divine substance, and could not return, because of the barrier between man and non-man. Kamalik has written, the entwined were cut apart, and since that day have never known content. They wander restlessly, ever seeking to unite again, and together find the jewel which is lost to earth forever. CRT 545. Lupsis has written, this first woman who came from the void is the eternally glorified goddess, the inspirer of hearts, the ideal of womanhood honored by all men, the priestess at the shrines of delicacy and tenderness. She was the ideal woman who, because of man's nature, is always tempted by his twin shade, the beast in his form. If the beast triumphs and she falls, the ideal becomes enshrouded in winding cloths of disillusionment, and something is lost to the heart of a man. CRT 546. These words are also there. They did not partake of wisdom, and fruit from the tree of knowledge is bitter. Men are denied their true birthright. The fall of man was a fall from loving contact with God into material carnality. The soul that had shared the consciousness of God fell into unconsciousness by becoming ensnared in matter. The fall severed man from the source of his spiritual sustenance. Thereafter his efforts were to struggle back in his blind groping for God. After the fall he discovered demons and found it easier to worship them than to continue the search. CRT 547. God is always waiting. Man is only to look up. But it is easier to go down the hill than to climb it. It is easier for man's spiritual beliefs to degenerate than to evolve. Who among man knows the truth and can write with certain knowledge? Would not this certainty be against the law? No man was there at the beginning to see and write, but of one thing alone we can be sure. The creating God knows how and why, and could the acts of one so great be without purpose?